welcome to Saturday Night Live. Coming in live from London town tonight, and it's a balmy, warm night in London. And we have a guest over there in America tonight, an exciting guest. We've got my co host, Brian Barrett. Hi there, Brian.
Hi.
Hi there. And our very exciting guest tonight is the High Magician, JS Garrett. Hi, JS. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, and thank you for your kind words there.
Oh, no, welcome back to the show. You were very popular last time, and I'm sure people will have a lot of questions. They can put it in the chat. I thought we'd start off tonight, and I thought we'd focus on Shemyaza. Brian, when I was going through a hard time, Brian introduced me to the really brilliant sigil that you drew out, and I meditated on the sigil and I got a connection and I had a to and fro. I wrote it all down. It was really interesting because he spoke in quite an otherworldly way, talked to me about my gin, started to tell me what I had to do, and then commune with him daily. For some reason, I was apprehensive about it, I suppose, fear maybe of moving forward. Um, so, what do you think about that, JS, for a kickoff for a beginner?
Well, I think that having a healthy amount of fear going into something like this is exactly that. It's very healthy and it's wise to, like what you did. You meditated on the sigil. You communed with them. You connected with that energy. Before you just dove straight into a full-on evocation, not knowing what you were dealing with. So I think you definitely went about it the right way. And whenever you're attempting to make contact with an otherworldly entity that you don't know until you meet, it's always good to go about it in the way that you did, with a healthy amount of fear and respect, as well
Hmm.
as you know not just diving right in and doing a pact with them or something. You definitely want to form a relationship with that entity and make sure that for one, it is who you think you're talking to, and that two, that your energies are going to mesh well with that entity and they have your best interest in mind. So I
Hmm.
think you did it exactly the way you should.
Thank you. How would I know that it was actually Shemyaza? I mean, he did speak in a really oldie worldy way, and it was very fascinating, actually.
All
He's
right, that's another good
yeah,
question. There are things out there that they call trickster gods, that
yeah,
will
yeah.
impersonate other entities. And
Mm,
I'm going to say that the best way to know that you were communing with him and making contact with him is that you were using his sigil, you were using the master key. So that's why I always, especially making contact with an entity for the first time, I typically, if they have a sigil that's documented and it's legit, then I'll definitely use that to open that as a gateway for that entity to come through and to open my perception and consciousness to that entity. So that's a really good way to know. But you also have to always follow your instincts and your intuition. If something feels bad, then it probably is. If something feels good, then it probably is. It's like the way the energy of these entities meshes with you. And I'm not saying that we can't be fooled. Anybody can potentially be fooled, but you weren't just shooting in the dark. You were using the proven technique to make contact with him, along with his energetic signature that is the master key. And I have it printed off here. I figured we were going to talk about it, so I just figured show the audience this is the sigil that we're talking on.
yeah. It's must be very powerful and well done for creating it, for channeling it, um, because it worked amazingly. I mean, I had tried doing stuff like that before and not having that connection. He began to tell me things about my life and telling me about seals I needed for protection, and also to um, study as well, study stuff on, I think it was planetary magic and elemental magic. I mean, it seemed a bit heavy going. I wasn't sure about the benefits of working with him. So I kind of, I stopped the communication. Does that matter? And can you pick it up again? And what are the benefits of working with someone like that?
Okay. Well, yeah, you can definitely work at your own pace, especially with an entity like him. He is a teacher. I mean, that is the main thing that Shemyaza does, and that's really the only thing that he was known for in the Dead Sea Scrolls. That he was, the leader of the Watchers, and that he was the teacher of root work and sorcery. He taught people magic, and that he was the knower of the name of God, which I think that was slightly mistranslated. I think he was the knower of the names, as in he is the entity that can tell you your true name, your God name, the name of your soul, whatever it is inhabiting this body. It's your birth name that your parents gave you is not your real name.
Right.
The name of your soul is the one that can give someone that information. And then once you have that information, you can start using that knowledge and rituals to empower yourself. For instance, through making sacrifices to that name, to that entity that is your soul, through the rite of deification, which is the ritual that he gave me along with the sigil when I made contact with him. So, I've never had anyone tell me that Shemyaza was pushy with them as far as, oh, you're moving too slow, or you need to back off and take a break. Entities that'll walk you through a path working typically will give you a break when you need one. I mean, they might kick your ass and run you through the ringer, but you also have to recover after a hard lesson, especially if it's a hard lesson. Shemyaza has always been very kind with everyone that I've spoken with that has worked with him. They work at their own pace. They get uncomfortable and they stop the communication, like you were saying. Never heard of any negative repercussions coming from that. Really, the only way you get yourself into a pickle is if you agree to something with an entity like that. Like you make a pact. You say, "Oh, you help me with this, then I'll do this for you. I'll get your sigil tattooed on my body or something like
wow.
that." Tattooed on my chest. And I wouldn't encourage anyone to do something that I wouldn't do myself. So if you make an agreement with an entity and you do not fulfill your end, then you can get yourself in a pickle. At the very least, you're going to piss them off and they won't want to work with you anymore. And depending on what you agree to and what type of entity you're working with, if you're working with a ruthless war god or something, then yeah, you might be in trouble. So I always tell people, don't agree to anything unless you are certain that you are going to uphold your end. And that's why that's a big part of why I use sacrifices in my rituals that I do for people. I think that people, especially people that haven't developed their communication skills with spirits to actually be able to communicate telepathically successfully with them, get themselves into pickles because they will summon an entity and ask for a favor. They don't give them anything in return. They might light some incense, some candles, might put out a glass of wine or something. But what if that entity's sitting there saying to you, like, all right, I'll do this for you, but you're going to do this for me. You don't really catch that. You don't catch that part of the communication, and you say okay and close out the ritual. You get exactly what you asked for, but then you don't do what you agreed to. You don't even know you agreed to it because you couldn't communicate with them properly. That's where people get themselves into pickles, I think, with working with spirits. So whenever I do a ritual for a client, I have a sacrifice that I'm offering on their behalf. We're not agreeing to anything else. I'm saying I will give you this sacrifice of burning flesh and blood in exchange for what I'm asking for this particular person. They've commissioned me to give you the sacrifice in exchange for this. All right. The entity can say no, and they could even potentially accept the sacrifice and not do what you want if they're not willing to do it. But most of these entities, I think, have a level of integrity and respect for a magician that approaches them with respect. And who's going to turn down a blood sacrifice? I mean, they all want blood sacrifices. So that typically is the best way to go about asking for favors, is to pay for it up front, pay for it in advance. Then you don't owe anything on the back end, and you're not getting yourself into trouble if you can't fulfill an agreement, especially if you don't fully understand what you agreed to because you're not communicating properly.
And do you think does Shemyaza demand or ask or enjoy blood sacrifices?
Well, he's not necessarily demanded them from me, but yes, he does appreciate that, along with every other entity I've ever come in contact with. Angels, they want blood sacrifice. Demons want blood sacrifice. Jinn want blood sacrifice. Like, you're giving them, it's an exchange of power. It's like a meal to them. You're feeding them. You're giving them the power and energy that they can then use to go forth into the world and do you this favor that you're asking for. And, I don't always ask for favors either. The spirits that I work with closely that protect me and my family and my home, I like to feed them and make sure they're strong and well fed. So, once in a while, I'll go out in the backyard, light up my ritual space, and summon all of what you would call familiars, like every entity that I've ever made contact with that is my ally. Call them all forth and feed them blood, feed them burning flesh and blood. I'll give them my blood. I'll give them the blood of a rooster or a rabbit, whatever it is that I am feeding them, and I offer that into the fire. And I ask for nothing in return. The only thing I want is to continue to have a good working relationship with them and for them to continue to be my allies. And you'd be surprised how far that goes. Yeah, the more they respect you and the more that you respect them and the more they know that you appreciate them, the better your life is going to be. And the more they're going to.
Do you, it's okay for you being out in the wilds and out in America, and you live out in the wilds, and I know Ia Coetting lives out in the wilds, but for someone like myself living in London, a city, we don't really have that facility to go out and light fire and do the whole thing of that. So what would you suggest for people in cities?
Well, what you just touched on right there is why there's such a high demand for my services, and why I pretty much quit my other job and I do this full time now, is because people who live in cities they don't have anywhere to perform a sacrificial rite like that, but they might want to still reap the benefits of it, so they can hire me as the middleman to do it for them. That's one option. There are other options that I've modified rituals for people and instructed them on how to perform blood sacrifice in their home when they live in the city. All right, there are ways to. I'm not going to say that it even makes the power any less, because you offer what you can, you do what you can, as long as you're doing your best, and that entity is going to appreciate that time and energy you're giving into it. All right, so the way you would do a sacrifice in your kitchen. You want to lay out a circle or cloth or whatever, on the little hardwood floor. It doesn't really matter. You have your sigil and you have a burn bowl, like a metal basin. I have one. It's in the sink. It's dirty. I used it last night, or I'd show it to you. But it's a silver bowl on a stiletto. So it's up off the surface of where it's sitting. It's going to get very hot. All right, and then you want to pour. I use Everclear. It's like 100% alcohol almost, and it burns clean. It doesn't put off any smoke. It will set off a smoke alarm because of the heat, so you might want to disconnect that. Most of mine are disconnected in my ritual area. So you would want to get a smaller sacrifice. You're not going to sacrifice a rooster in your kitchen, because you're going to repaint the walls every time you do. All right, blood goes everywhere. But a small bird, like if you went to the pet store and bought a parakeet or a quail or a serpent or a lizard, something with a decent amount of blood that's small and easy to handle and control the blood flow, then you could light that fire in the basin. You could summon that entity. You could decapitate your sacrifice and spill the blood on the sigil, spill the blood in the burning basin. And then instead of burning the body afterwards, you're going to take that bloody sigil and burn it. It's got your blood on it, and it's got the animal's blood on it. All right. Once the fire burns out, then you have the body of the bird. Now, if it's something you can eat, like a quail, then I recommend that people cook that and eat it. If it's something like a snake that you're probably not going to eat, then most people have a barbecue. Even in the city, they have like a little charcoal grill or something in their, front patio or on their balcony. Your neighbors aren't going to have a clue what you're doing. It looks like you're barbecuing. So you go light your charcoal and put your sacrifice on that burning charcoal and let it completely incinerate. So, that's a way that you could modify one of my rituals that I do in the backyard and perform that in your kitchen potentially.
Interesting. So, but what if you're a bit gory? I'm a vegetarian, and I find meat, even like steaks, I just can't go there. It reminds me of human flesh a little bit too much. If you're not going to do that, should I not bother trying to communicate with Shemyaza, or what? What's your thought?
You mean not willing to make a sacrifice?
Just I hate blood. It just makes me like.
No, I wouldn't say that you shouldn't bother. I mean, he would still work with you. I mean, we're talking about like a high level of power that we're trying to generate here to create action at a distance and to feed these spirits. I'm not saying that he's never demanded a blood sacrifice from me. He's never demanded anything except for that I share this with everybody else and that I publish the ritual. That was an agreement that I made with him when he gave me this information.